Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I want to talk about the newly revealed mana-based gems and also Stormbind, which is a related gem that was demonstrated by Grinding Gear Games today. All of these are getting added to the game when the Delirium expansion hits on March 13th or 14th, depending where you are in the world. So, what's happening here? Alongside PoE Delirium, we're introducing gems that allow you to translate mana investment into damage. So this is something that if you're playing any sort of build that puts a heavy emphasis on stacking mana, which hasn't been popular except in a couple of specific defensive niches in the past, then this will allow you to translate that mana investment into damage. So this post shares more info about the Stormbind and Arcane Cloak skills as well as the Archmage Support. I'm actually most excited about Arcane Cloak, but Archmage Support is cool as well, and Stormbind does nothing for me so far, but of course, as with everything, let's wait till we see the numbers. So, Arcane Cloak is a guard skill, so it's basically a substitute for Steel Skin. Steel Skin is the default guard skill. It's the one that you use if you don't have a guard skill that's perfect for your build. And I do think that you should always use a guard skill on builds at the moment. I think they're just that good. But where a lot of the time you will set up your guard skills to be triggered by you taking damage, so you'll use them in conjunction with customer damage taken, or at least that's a popular option. I don't think that's the way you're going to want to use Arcane Cloak, because Arcane Cloak doubles as a DPS cooldown as well. So, Arcane Cloak is a guard skill, and like other guard skills, it is an instant with a cooldown that doesn't expire until the buff's effect ends. Now, the skill effect can end for two reasons. It can end because it burns out, or it can end because it times out. But until it ends, its cooldown doesn't start. And the cooldowns on the other guard skills is 3 seconds, so they're pretty considerable, at least in the middle of a combat. Now, the extent of your build's mana investment will scale both the offensive and defensive properties of Arcane Cloak. So what Arcane Cloak does, it eats a percentage of your unreserved mana, and it grants you a buff that absorbs 75% of all damage you take before that damage affects your life or energy shield. So what this means is that if an enemy hits you for 6,000 damage and your buff is large enough, it's at least 4,500, then the buff takes 4,500 of the damage that was aimed at you. You still take 1,500. That goes to either your energy shield or your life as appropriate. On the flip side, if you were hit for 6,000 but you only had 4,000 damage on your buff, then the 4,000 will be consumed. It'll protect you from 4,000 damage, the buff will be discharged completely, and you will take 2,000 life and or energy shield in damage. These defensive buffs are really strong. They're something that give you a very powerful reactive cooldown. If you see an enemy winding up for a big hit, then you can just go, alright, in response I Arcane Cloak. These will be instant cast buffs, and so they're very, very powerful defensively. But that is something Arcane Cloak does that is the same as Steel Skin, is the same as Molten Shell. The size of the buff, for Steel Skin it's a set amount, it's based upon the level of the skill gem Steel Skin. For Molten Shell, it's a scalable amount that depends upon your character's investment into armor. For Arcane Cloak, this buff will scale with the amount of mana that Arcane Cloak consumed when you cast it. And Arcane Cloak will eat a percentage of your mana. We don't have hard figures on this. Now, one thing that I am concerned about is that Arcane Cloak might be absolutely brutal if you find yourself in a situation where you're at low mana for whatever reason and a big hit is coming in. However, other than that, I think it will be something that any build that currently uses Mind over Matter will want to at least seriously consider Arcane Cloak just for the defensive buffs. Now, while the buff is active, so that means from the time that you cast Arcane Cloak up until the time that either the last point of damage is absorbed by the Arcane Cloak's ablative shield, or until the Arcane Cloak buff times out. During this period, you will gain additional lightning damage, proportional to the mana used by the skill. So this damage bonus relies on the buff being active, so you'll need to ensure that you don't take more damage than the buff allows, or you'll lose the effect of both until the cooldown resets. The flexible nature of this skill allows you to use it in different scenarios. You can use it as a burst of damage against bosses, or as a quick layer of defense against incoming spike damage. Just make sure that you've got lots of mana to consume. Now, I think if you can solve the mana issues of this skill, it seems like it will be an incredibly powerful buff. However, you're going to need to have extraordinary mana regeneration, and you're going to need to have a huge amount of available mana. This is unreserved mana only. So if you're, this also means that you have a large opportunity cost in that you probably can't use any 50% reservation auras, and using even a 25% reservation like a Herald is going to come at a severe, is going to have a severe impact on the power of your Arcane Cloak. However, I think this is looking really strong. I also like this in theory on builds that use the unique item, the Ivory Tower. Now, the Ivory Tower is a unique chest that was added in 3.9, and it functions as an alternative to Chevron's Wrappings with different stats. It's more designed for providing you with a massive energy shield buffer if you have an investment into life. However, it's not quite as defensively strong as Chevron's Wrappings, where Chevron's Wrappings causes incoming chaos damage to go to your energy shield always, allowing you to reserve all of your life except for 1 point, pretty much without any danger at all. The Ivory Tower causes incoming damage to go instead to your mana pool. Incoming chaos damage. And this can be a bit dicey because if you run out of mana, then suddenly you're taking the remaining damage straight to your life pool. And chances are you have more energy shield than you have life. So for that reason, the Ivory Tower is a little bit more tricky to build around. It's something you tend to want some chaos resistance with, but it is very rewarding and very powerful if you can use it. And of course, if you're using the Ivory Tower, then you're going to have a big chunky mana pool, which is potentially ideal for use with the Arcane Cloak skill. So I'm really excited to see how this goes. I think it'll be probably best on self-cast builds, but I'm open to experimenting. We just really need to see some hard numbers on this gem. All of the gem information is going to be revealed in the middle of next week, about 7 days after you see this video. Next up we have Stormbind. Now Stormbind is the lightning-themed Flame Blast that's being added in 3.10. Now where Flame Blast is pretty easy on the mana, Stormbind looks like it is murder on your mana pool. But potentially there's a reward for that. Potentially you'll be rewarded with big damage. Stormbind is a level 28 channeling skill that works in a fashion that's similar to Mines, but with a channeling component. It actually doesn't look like that when you watch the video, and we'll watch the video later. The initial channeling aspect of Stormbind lays out a grid of runes that hinder enemies. So hinder causes them to move 30% slower. As a second layer of offense, Stormbind also grants the Rune Blast ability, a channeling spell that upgrades the area of effect and damage of Stormbind's runes. The more mana you spend while channeling it, the greater the area of effect and the damage that your upgraded runes will have. When you stop channeling, all your Stormbind runes will detonate in a sequence, dealing lightning damage in an area, and your character will also be teleported to the location of the first rune that was detonated, which hopefully is now clear of enemies because they've all died. Otherwise, you could be in for a spot of trouble there. Because of its various components, Stormbind can be used in several ways, either as a single layer to hinder enemies, a sizable blast for your foes, or as a movement option. Because of the way it scales, you'll be rewarded for having a high mana cost and fast cast speed, as these allow the runes to be upgraded quickly and to a higher capacity. Now this skill is mechanically somewhat interesting, but I feel that it looks too clunky. There's a video that I'll show later, I'll put it on and discuss it, but it feels like it's just a bit too clunky for how fast-paced Path of Exile is at the moment. So I'm not particularly excited by this skill. However, I have certainly been wrong in my initial assessment of skills before, and I will be again. This might be the time. Next up there is Archmage Support, which is one of those support gems that doesn't look like it does much until, in terms of graphically and the like, but it looks like when you actually see it in action, it looks like it has a massive transformative effect on the skill it's used. So, Archmage Support massively increases the mana cost of a skill and simultaneously rewards you for spending additional mana on that skill. Archmage can be used with any spell that deals damage with hits and that has a mana cost. So, important to unpack that. It needs to be a spell. This means that it can't be used on attacks like Cyclone. It needs to be used on skills like Ice Nova that are actually spells, that have the spell tag. They need to deal damage with hits. Sorry, Essence Drain players, that where your skill is dealing its damage through a damage over time effect, you need to be getting that initial single impact of damage. This is not going to scale damage over time, or at least I don't think it does. If a skill does both a hit and damage over time. And skill needs to have a mana cost as well. Now converts the supported skill into one that scales with mana investment. Instead of using the skill's inherent mana cost, the Archmage support causes it to use a percentage of your unreserved maximum mana. The larger the size of your unreserved mana pool, the greater the cost of the spell, but also the bigger the effect of it. Mana multipliers from other support gems will further modify this cost. So I think you're going to find a situation where Archmage support is going to be absolute murder on your mana pool, and you'll see that when we watch the video. As a trade-off for this higher mana cost, you'll gain lightning damage based on the new amount of mana your supported skill costs. The higher the mana cost, the more additional damage you'll gain from Archmage support. Now notice that this is lightning damage. There's a couple of ways you can use this. The first way is that you can use this lightning damage as lightning damage. You can use it alongside a skill like Arc that deals lightning damage. The other way that you could use it is in conjunction with the unique item Call of the Brotherhood, which converts lightning damage into cold damage. If you have 2 Call of the Brotherhood, you can convert as much as 96% of this to cold damage. Then you're looking like you might be able to go around freezing enemies, and freezing enemies is objectively very, very strong. You could then use this in conjunction with either a skill that deals native cold damage or a skill that deals native lightning damage, and get some significant benefit from it either way. The support naturally increases in power as you level and gain a larger mana pool, but further investment into mana on your passive tree will greatly improve its damage. So let's have a quick look at the video. Firstly, you'll see Arcane Cloak. This is not a graphically flashy skill. It's not particularly clear what's going on here, but here we go. Notice there's a shield, and the person was casting a spell. They're just casting their Arc. You don't see anything special about the Arc, but it deals more damage. Now here's Arc, and you'll notice just how little damage they're doing to Popero, and here it is with Archmage. The absolute murder on the mana pool, but then at the same time, the damage is incredibly scaled up. Here's Stormbind. Now, I'm not that impressed with this skill. As I say, it feels like Flame Blast. This is being used as a cast while channeling, and the payload for cast while channeling is some sort of curse setup, I think. That's temporal chains, I think. So it looks like they're using it to trigger temporal chains regularly. So that's, anyways, like that's looking like an option, something that it exists. I'm sure someone will make a build around it. If the numbers are great, Stormbind might end up being a good skill. Just as I say, I'm not mechanically excited by it, but I am certainly excited by Arcane Cloak and Archmage. Archmage, I'm sure there will be builds that scale 8,000 mana or more, that find ways to turn that into both defense and offense simultaneously, and have a 6 link with Archmage to burn down heavy bosses, whilst also having a 4 link that they can use for clearing weak trash. Arcane Cloak, on the flip side, is going to be something that any build with a large mana pool is going to want to consider as an alternative to Steelskin, and I think it will do quite well there. Got any comments or questions though? Fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you have a good one.